Hey guys, Chris here from Carolot Farm. Today is the day that we're digging potatoes. We have so many potatoes out in the garden that need to be dug up. Yesterday evening, my husband started the process and I think he dug maybe a quarter to a third of the bed. And so today I'm hoping to do the same. I'm not planning to harvest all of them though, because once you dig your potatoes, they're usually a little muddy, sometimes they're a little wet, and they do need to come inside and dry. And so we just don't have but so much space to really lay them out to do that. So we're gonna kind of dig them up in stages. And then once they dry, we can store them a little more easily. But you don't wanna store them all together when they're still damp, because that could increase their chances of molding and just spoiling. So drying them is an important step. But today I'm going to be digging some more. Yesterday my husband dug up the first batch of potatoes, and some of these are really good sized potatoes. Very impressed with them. So I'm curious to see what I find today. I imagine we'll have similar luck, but it's like mining for gold, you know, you just never know what you might find. All kinds of treasures out there in the garden today. I had to come back to the house and get my bucket for my potatoes. You know, I was just thinking about potatoes because I thought, hey, I should refresh myself on the process. So we planted our potatoes back around St. Patrick's Day. Technically, I think it was March 18th, not the 17th, that they went to the ground. We must have been busy on the 17th, or it was raining or something. So the potatoes have been in the ground now for about 4 months. It is now the 11th of July. And this year, we decided that rather than pull the potatoes earlier in the growing season, we would let them go the full length of their growing season, and we would wait to harvest them until after the plants, dried up and kind of died off. And so that's what we've done. And I'll do a little turn for you here. Our potatoes, you actually can't even see any of the dark vines anymore, the plants. They really have all dried up, and then we've got a lovely stand of weeds here. But this right here is exactly where we had those 2 rows of potatoes. And we started with seed potatoes that we bought from our local farm and garden store. And now I'm gonna see if I can't find us some potatoes. My husband started digging the potatoes yesterday evening, and he thought he had maybe dug about a third of the patch. I am looking though here, and I think it's more like maybe a quarter that he was able to harvest yesterday. You know, we still have a lot of potatoes underground through here. I will dig potatoes until my bucket is full, and then I'll stop and see just how far down the row we got. I imagine we might get another quarter of these potatoes dug. We'll see though. As I get ready to dig my potatoes, I'm just gonna use a small little, hand shovel. You could take a pitchfork if you wanted and kind of loosen the soil to kind of pop those potatoes up. We haven't done a lot of potatoes in the past, certainly not a large, crop of them like this. And so usually we just kind of gently dig them. But there are so many different ways you can go about something. But this is what I'm gonna try right now. Let's pretend that my garden has been really well weeded around my potatoes. And if that were the case, such as it appears here, but the rest of you know just how overgrown my potatoes really are, you would be able to see the remnants of the plant. And just below the soil lie the potatoes. And so if you can find the plant, you can more strategically and more carefully begin to dig around the roots of, well, not really the roots, but the potatoes, right? The potatoes are these, rooted tubers. You could then more easily and carefully dig them up. So I said I wasn't going to do any weeding, but I think I'm going to have to, just because it makes me happy. Makes me happy. But it also allows me to identify where those plants are, and it also helps me to prepare this bed for a future crop, because probably this fall we'll put something else in there. And rather than just turn all those weeds down into the soil, which you could do, I really prefer to pull what I can and then work on amending the soil with a lot less weed to start with. So that's my plan right now. I am going to first start by just using my hands to help identify where these potatoes are. You know, they are not very far under the ground, and you can even see some are a little green where they likely had some sun on them at some point. We did come back a few weeks ago and we did put a little more soil on top to mound them up. But now that I have really kind of identified where my potatoes are, I can begin to pull them up. And you can see, you know, they are still attached to the plant here. I can gently pull them, and I have a few here. Looks like a big one. Oh, this is a really, so I mean, that's a really big potato. I mean, compared to my fist, I mean, that's a monster potato there. So you keep digging. Now this one is cut in half, and I know that that was my seed potato. A few of the seed potatoes were very, very large, and I cut them, and we then planted them, and they did well. But your seed potatoes are spent. They're squishy, they're kind of rotten, and you would not want to eat this. And so I'm just gonna, you know, toss it aside for now. But if you keep digging around, you will continue to find a few more smaller potatoes. So, you know, the big ones are gonna be here at the top, closer to the plant. But if you keep digging around, you're likely to find some real small ones. And like I say, I gotta watch out. I see all kinds of little red ants in here. So hopefully I don't get into a big ant's nest. But the name of the game is harvesting potatoes today. For the finishing search for those little remaining potatoes, I did use my little shovel. That was super handy. And I want to show you from this one plant, we have one super big potato, we had maybe 4 medium, and then 3 smaller ones. So from 1/2 of a seed potato, that was a pretty good yield. Give this next plant here a little tug, and a very nice cluster of potatoes have come up. So I will clean them off and dig a few more up and continue the process, because we have a lot more potatoes to work on. A very healthy stand of potatoes here. This second plant that we just dug up, you know, we have what look like 4 big potatoes, a couple of medium size, and then again, a collection of small ones. But if you see this darker potato here, I am pretty sure this was the seed potato. It's not super squishy, it's not, you can't look at it and go, you can't just look at it and go, oh yeah, it's definitely a bad potato. But compared to how all of the others look like that came up from that same plant, I'm pretty certain that this is the one that we will discard. But I wanted to show you that because sometimes you pull them up, and I hope I find one, and there's just nothing but like the skin pretty much, and it's all completely gone. But this one is still pretty firm. So, you know, hopefully I'll find one of the squishier ones though to show you later. Working here on the farm, I do a lot of multitasking. So forgive me if sometimes it feels like I'm jumping here and jumping there, but that's just kind of the way I go about my day. That being said, after digging up 2 potato plants, I need to go and turn my minis out. I brought them in and fed them, and then I got started here with you and the potatoes, and now I need to go turn them out, and then I'll be back. It's kind of the story of my day, or my days. You know, I try to be as efficient as possible, which means I usually have multiple things going on at or around the same time. So, you know, if you're like me, that's probably pretty normal. I think a lot of people today do a lot of multitasking. Sometimes it means that no one project or person or conversation gets our full attention, which is a shame. But we live such a busy life that sometimes to really get the most done, you do have to kind of be darting from here and there, and you know, you're doing a load of laundry while you're making dinner, or you're, you know, turning the horses out in the middle of gardening. So, you know, doing as many things lined up as possible is helpful, but it does mean that I am popping here, there, and everywhere sometimes. You can see Sweetheart is here, Rocky is in the farther feedlot, he's the little black one, and I could hear him pushing on the gate, so I know he's ready. Here on the farm, not only do we have the garden, which keeps us pretty busy, but we have 4 miniature horses, and 2 of the 4 come in each morning and get a little grain for breakfast. And so that's usually how I start my days, feeding the horses, picking the paddocks, which I've not yet done today. I'm actually going to do some gardening, and then I'm going to pick. So now that Rocky is finished eating, little silly guy, you're so silly, I'm going to let him out. And then Sweetheart is next door here. I'm going to let her out. I might even leave the gates open. Sometimes they do a little switcheroo, and you know, Rocky's hoping that she didn't eat everything. I'm sure she ate everything. And then our other 2 minis, Shenanigans, he is this brown one right here, and Snuggles is just beyond. She's the brown and white pinto. So again, we have 4 minis. We've got a very happy, robust garden, always grass to mow, things to do, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but I grew up riding horses, so I've been around horses pretty much my whole life. As a young adult, we had horses here on this farm when our daughters were very little, and then we didn't have horses for a few years, and just in the last year we have adopted these 4 miniature horses. And so it's been a really fun year. You know, we're making these videos by and large to document the year, and I didn't realize how big a part of the year the garden would be. And so you know, those are the 2 things that keep us pretty busy here on the farm. But I am very fortunate that I get to really just be here and be everyone and everything's caregiver. So I do count my blessings. I know I'm very fortunate. And like I said, you know, there's no other way I'd like to spend my day than with my horses and out in my garden. You know, my cats are a big part of my life. They always come and say hi. So I'm a pretty happy camper, which is another thing I love to do. We love to go camping. So we love the outdoors, you know, all aspects, the good, the bad, the clean, the dirty. It's all fun. I want to give you a quick little look at our garden. Everything is really, really happy these days. That silver planter that you see on its side, that had been around our cabbages and our broccoli plants. And we actually pulled those up yesterday, and that is just sort of sitting there out of the way. But the garden is really happy this time of year. You know, here are those potatoes we're digging. Now this potato here, this plant, you can actually see in my shovel here is that gooey, spent seed potato. You know, there's nothing left. It was just the skin that I was telling you. So I will certainly just throw that to the side. But these potatoes were planted a little deeper in the ground, and I'm actually having to dig down to find them. Whereas some of them, like I showed you earlier, were up top. Now these are also seeming to be a little farther down in the ground. So when I start digging, I will do so very carefully because I don't want to mar the potatoes. They will not last as long. So you just never know how you're gonna have to go about it, but these need a little digging. As I am digging around my potatoes and harvesting them, I am finding some little green potato berries. These formed on the plant back around when it was blooming. These are actually poisonous. These little green berries or potato balls, I guess potato berries is what people tend to call them. They are, though, poisonous. They have a toxicity to them, and so you do not want to eat them. You don't want your animals to eat them. They look similar to the itty bitty teeny tiny potatoes that you might find, but these are almost all green. They're almost like little apples, very firm. So again, if you see these, make sure you discard them somewhere where you know, inquisitive animals won't get a hold of them. Real quick, I want to show you the difference. On the left, these greener berries are those potato berries, and on the right, we have just some small little baby potatoes. But you can tell, not only are, my fingers are so dirty, sorry guys, not only are these they have a definite greenness to them, a green coloring, but the tops, their little caps where they were attached to the plants are very different. You are not going to find that on a potato. I mean, you might find a little root that came out somewhere, but it's not going to look quite the same. So these are the potato berries versus just small little baby potatoes. Again, if you find these green potato berries, discard them where you and your pets or animals will not eat them. Here is another potato I just pulled, another plant. You know, here's the stem. And you can see that the seed potato, all that is left here at the bottom of this root ball, is just the skin and a little bit of that slimy inside that was once the potato. So yeah, I just want to show you that because I didn't realize that the potatoes kind of did that. They sort of surrender themselves for the good of the others. You know, this is a very happy crop here. You know, these just came off the plant, and then we still have several more under the ground here. So, you know, for one little seed potato, that's a good number of potatoes that it yielded. I wish I had been filming when I went to pick this up just a moment ago. I kind of squealed. This was that seed potato. You can see the top pulled off right here that was stuck to the bottom of the plant. But I went to toss it in the bucket with the rest of them, and it was a squishy surprise. Not a firm potato, but that is just another look at a seed potato and what becomes of it. Looking here at the potato bed, it looks like we have done maybe a little over half. We have harvested a little over half of our potatoes at this point. And so I will take these into the house, lay them out to dry, and we'll come back another day to finish up the remaining potatoes. My cat Frankie here has been hanging around just about the entire time I've been working on the potatoes. He's either sleeping in the shade or chasing after insects. But most days, if I'm in the garden, one if not more cats are around. Thank you so much for joining me today in the garden. I hope you enjoyed our potato picking. We got a lot done, and luckily I don't have to water because we've been getting a lot of evening thunder showers. And as a summer gardener, that's pretty nice because it's one less thing to do. So I'm gonna say farewell, check back soon, and we hope to see you in the future. Bye guys.